Hey everyone, welcome back to another video in Java programming series. And in today's video, we'll be talking about functions in Java. So far, we have been writing code on our main method, so in an unorganized way, even though it's pretty good for getting started and learning things. But when it comes to the practical approach, so we barely write code like this, right? So wouldn't it be better if we can split, these codes into multiple sections, the relevant codes, and then also reuse that in multiple places? So in Java or any other programming language, it's mostly programming agnostic. So we can always define function, reuse them, and also organize the codes into different functions depending on the nature of the code. So far, let's say if we want to greet user, say John, and then we have to write hello John. And after that, if we want to say Smith, hello Smith, repeat. But instead of that, we can just create a function that takes some name and then says greet name. And when we call it, we can just pass the name to users, right? So let me create a file and I'll show you how to exactly do that. All right, so I'm going to create a new compact file since I'm using Java 25, as you already know. But if you are not using Java 25, just go with class. Everything else is going to be similar. All right, I'll be writing compact file and I'm going to write function demo as a file name. And this is the main function, right? This is an entry point, as we already know. And the syntax for creating the function is, this here, this void, and this is called a return type. And then, so I can say a return underscore type as a single word, and then the name of function. Okay. So, but make sure that when we write the name of the function in Java, we write like this, name of function, right? Even though I have written like this here as a comment, the name of the function is going to be. So this is going to be camel case, always the camel case in Java, right? Many different programming languages follow different conventions, like Python uses underscore format. But in Java, so when you have a single word, for example, main, you are going to write just all lowercase. But if you have, let's say, main method, and then you are going to write capital. Okay. So let's say we are creating a function called greet. So what I can do is just say void. The void means it returns nothing, right? I will show you what exactly return means. And let's say greet, and then I'm going to call it user. Okay, and inside of the body, this is the body of function. Inside, I'm going to be writing io.println, and then hello, and then user. All right, and let's say if I run this program, we don't see hello user, right? So the important things to keep in mind is by default, this is not going to be executed. Now we have, separated this code from the main method execution. Okay, so this is not present in this block. If we ever want to execute this code, what we have to do is call the function. Okay, this is called call or invocation. Is invocation, yeah, invocation of function, right? So call or invocation of function, right? And what we do is great, just type it like this. Okay, so this is calling, and if I run it again, we will see hello user printed on the console, right? So this is our very first function. So let's say I was talking about, reusing. I'm going to be leaving it as is, right? For example, let's say someone is studying, or I want to get the name of the university. Okay, so I just want to return the university. So what I can do is get and then university. All right, and then what I'm going to do is write body. But since I need to define the return type, right? So what I'm gonna do is, what does it return? Get university, and I can say specific like name. Okay, so what I can do is, since the name of the university is going to be like, like Harvard or MIT or whatever it is, so it is going to be string. Okay, so I'm going to be saying, hey, I need to return university name, which is of type string. That means this name is up to us. It's just like a meaningful name. But what I'm saying is, this function will return string value, something like um, Harvard, for example. Okay, I cannot return one. So, and in order to do that, what I can do is a return. I can say return and then university name. Let's say MIT. Okay, so this is like returning. Now the compiler is happy because it finds that this return type exactly matches with this, right? So if I do call this from main method, and if I run it, it is going to print nothing, right? So this is because, yeah, like we saw earlier, so by default placing it here doesn't do. Since we it is returning, that means it's throwing something, right? So it is returning something. Let's say you asked for some value or some money from someone else, and then they are giving you, then you need to catch it, right? So we have not got anything here. So what I can do is, since it returns the string, I'm gonna be saying uni name, right? Now this uni name is something that we can print. Okay, so print and then uni name. All right, so if I print it, look at this, MIT. But now it's still, that this function is usable. But what if I want Harvard, right? I want to get some Harvard or something like that. So we can really create another functions with a name Harvard or something like that. But that's not the point of creating function, right? What we can do is we can even pass argument, or some people call it parameters, whatever you call it. We can pass argument to function, right? I can say, okay, so this will be generic, right? So what I can say is string. I'll be receiving a string to this function, all right? And then I'm gonna be saying university name, uni name. Instead of returning this hard code value, I'm gonna be returning this uni name, right? Now look at this. Since the compiler is yelling at us because this function called getUniversityName expects one argument, no zero, not one. Okay, only one argument which is of type unit name. If I send some argument, it's like a string, not a string value, it's not going to work, right? Because it has to be a string. But now instead of passing integer value, if I pass a correct university name, the compiler is happy. So if I run it, okay, all right, if I run it, look at this MIT. And if I want another university, for example, I can say university uni name and then MIT, right? And instead of printing MIT, now I can do get uni name and then let's say UCLA, and also store it in a variable. So it's also going to be string type, and then name, name UCLA. All right. And so I'll be copying this and just replacing name UCLA, right? So if I print it, that is going to be UCLA. So look at this. Now this function is more generalized, right? So it's more reusable. I can use in so many places. And let's say what I want to do is I want to give a short example. For example, I'm going to be calculating a system that allows the user to know whether he or she is eligible for voting or not, right? Let's imagine a simple voting system. So is eligible to vote, or we can say is eligible to be mayor, right? Let's say there is a mayoral election in a town, and then we want to know whether they are eligible for becoming a mayor candidate. I mean, they are just going to be a part of election. So but this can return a boolean, so we can return anything we want, but the meaningful return value would be boolean. So we'll be saying whether yes, true, or no, that means false. So what I'm going to say is boolean, right? And then it should return whether true or false, right? So what I can say is inside of this function, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another two function, right? Mini function. And so let's imagine to become a mayor, so one has to be at least 25, and then no cases on court. Okay, so and then if these conditions are met, we can say okay, yeah, you can be part of the campaign, right? So let's go and then say boolean again is over 25. Okay, so is over 25, and we can say a return, and then this is going to take is integer is, and age greater, all right, we can say greater or equal to 25, right? So that means this is age is greater or equal to 25. That means it is going to return true if age is greater or equal to 25, otherwise it's going to return false. And then we can also create function, and are there um, are there cases on quotes? Okay. I'm not sure if it is grammatically correct, maybe in quotes. And so let's say the string name. For now, let's not worry about writing logic. Let's say return false. Okay, I'm just going to show you one thing, right? We can call function from inside the function. Okay, when it has to be at least 25. So what we can do is if and is over 25, let's say user is 25, um, user is again is, so what I can pass is here I can pass is again. Okay, so if is over 25, so if it is not, what we can do is return false. All right. So if it is not at least 25, we are immediately going to return false, because we don't even need to check whether there are cases in quotes or not. And if are there cases in quotes, if there are cases in quotes, so since this is a Boolean expression, you are not required to do something like this, right? Sorry, if equals to false, you are really not required to do that. Okay, you can just say if there are cases in quotes, it is again going to be return false, right? So you can either, and since the compiler expects the return type, what if these both of these are not true? That means it's not over 25. So there are cases in code. So if both of them are passed, we can say return true, right? So this is one of the ways. We can also write it differently. So for example, instead of let's say is eligible to be mayor, I'm gonna be right. It's eligible to be mayor. Let's say 25 exactly, and I'm gonna introduce a variable and eligible to be mayor. Okay, if I print it, look at this. This is true because these 25, and by default it's always going to be returned false as a hardcode value, but we can also parameterize it. But if I write 20 instead of 25, it's going to be false, right? And if it is, let's say 25, but here I return true, it is also going to be false here, right? Because now, even though the user is above 25, but he has like some cases in quotes. So this is how we can actually use function, and also use function inside of function, right? So, and like I said, we can return any type. For example, we saw how to return boolean types, and the other way could be, for example, you can also do if all right, if, and then is, if not is over 25, and then is, or if it is not, right, just, or has quotes, has cases, oh sorry, are there cases in quotes. If one of these values is true, if it is not over 25, so what we can do is just return false, right? Because it's the user is not over 25, that means below 25, so we are not, if it is true. But this is if it is, right, if this is true, right, and then it's also going to be, so let's say it is false, now the user is 25 or above, but they have cases in quotes, so this line is essentially same as this line, right? And if you check it, it works the same way. So true, right, because the user is now 25, but if I do, sorry, 24, the user is going to be ineligible, right? It's false, so it's the same thing as before. And the other way also, it's a different approach. You can write whatever you can. I'm going to comment it, right? So second way, and then I can say first way, so you can just make a note. But we don't even need to do that. We can just return directly not is over, sorry, we can say is over 25 is, and then are there cases and quotes, but we have to do it reverse. That means has to be above 25, and then also there should not be any cases in quotes, right? So if I do it, it will be true, since it is 25, and if I do 24 for it now, it is also going to be false, right? So these are just some alternative ways. So this looks more clean, and also it occupies less space. So but if the statements are simple, you can just do like this, or you know you can even store these in a variable called, let's say, is over 25, like we stored here, and then use those variable instead of calling directly function, right? You can do either way. There are multiple ways, it's just doing the same thing. And so the one of the other things that I wanted to show you is in Java, for example. Let's say I have a function that actually changes the value of the variable, right? I'm going to define here so that it makes uh, it's easier to type and see. Let's write a function called wait. That means it is not going to return anything. So I'll show you what does that mean. So wait change, and then let's say I'm going to be taking an integer value called, let's say you want to update the ID, for example, and then you know ID equals to 100, right? You always changed ID to 100, right? And if you do s out ID here, so after changing ID, okay, changing ID. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be calling change, and then here I'm going to pass ID. All right. Since it requires an ID, so integer ID equals, so let's say it was initially 1 2 3 4, but now I'm changing it to, so initially it is 1 2 3 4, and let's see original ID equals ID. I mean, what do you think the answer will be, right? So here the ID is 1234. Change ID, and then now we change the ID to 100. And what would be the value here and right here, right? Let's see, and I will explain why this is so. All right, so after changing, ID is 100 and original ID is 1234, right? So here, even after calling this method, this is because the function call or Java always passes by value, so it doesn't pass the reference, right? It doesn't pass the memory location, it just passes the value, or you can say the copy of the value. So copy of the value. So even though this ID is, for example, here 123 and it was changed here, this ID is only applicable right here. Okay, so this is why you won't see any reflection when you print this value, right? That was one of the important concepts. And I think it's all about functions, so it just takes some arguments, and it is always not single argument. You can pass as many arguments as you want, but it's always advisable that you pass only few and relevant parameters, and don't pass because otherwise it's going to be like error prone. Other than that, we will talk about like overloading different functions, and also I wanted to mention that some people called different, maybe some people might call methods, right? So there is no like a standard definition, but when we usually deal with object and class, then we call it a method instead of function, right? But when we are just using here like this, we usually call function, but don't worry about that, you can call either. Maybe best would be still function, but when we talk about object calling function, then we call it method, right? And I will talk about method overloading in the next video. And so if you have any questions, just let me know in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching.